Look up on a clear night and you will see her, the Great Bear, the most famous constellation in the northern sky, wheeling slowly around the pole and never setting below the horizon. But almost no one remembers that this pattern of stars is, according to the Greeks, a person, a young woman who was wronged again and again, transformed against her will, and finally placed among the stars, where she remains to this night. Her name was Callisto, and her story is one of the saddest in all of mythology, because Callisto did nothing to deserve any of what happened to her. She was a victim from beginning to end, punished for a crime committed against her, turned into a beast, and nearly killed by the one person she loved most. How does an innocent young woman end up as a bear, and then as a constellation that can never rest? That is the question at the heart of this story. So tonight, you'll hear the real tale of Callisto, the huntress, the deception, the cruel transformation, and the strange mercy that lifted her at last into the sky. If you enjoy these stories, take a moment to subscribe. It genuinely keeps this channel alive, and tell me in the comments which myth you'd like next. Now settle in and let's look up at the stars. Callisto was a young woman of Arcadia, that wild and forested land, and she had chosen a particular kind of life. She was one of the companions of Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, one of the band of young huntresses who roamed the mountains and forests with the goddess, living free and wild, devoted to the chase. To belong to the company of Artemis was to take a solemn vow. The goddess and her followers swore themselves to chastity, to a life apart from marriage and men, dedicated wholly to the hunt and to the wild. Callisto had taken that vow gladly. She was one of Artemis's favorites, a skilled and devoted huntress, happy in the freedom of her life among the forests and the mountains. She asked nothing more than to run with the goddess and her companions, to hunt by day and rest in the wild places, far from the world of cities and households. It was a good life, and an innocent one. But Callisto was young and beautiful, and in the world of the Greek gods, beauty was a kind of danger all by itself, because it could draw the attention of a god. And the god whose attention fell upon Callisto was the most powerful and the most dangerous of them all. The god was Zeus, the king of the gods. And Zeus, as the old stories tell again and again, was forever pursuing mortal women to the endless fury of his wife Hera. He saw Callisto in the forests of Arcadia, and he desired her. But Callisto was a sworn follower of Artemis, devoted to her vow, and she would never have willingly broken it. And so Zeus resorted to deception. In the cruelest detail of the whole story, the god is said to have disguised himself as Artemis herself, taking the form of the very goddess Callisto loved and trusted and served, so that when the disguised Zeus approached her, Callisto suspected nothing, welcoming the one she believed to be her beloved mistress. By the time she understood the deception, it was too late. Zeus had his way and departed, returning to Olympus, leaving Callisto alone with the consequences of a thing that had been done to her against her will through a lie. She had kept her vow in her heart. She had been tricked and wronged by a god she could not have refused and could not have resisted. But the world of the Greek gods was not a fair one, and it did not much care for the difference between what a person chose and what was forced upon them. Callisto would be punished as if the fault were entirely her own. And in time, she could no longer hide what had happened. For Callisto was now with child, and as the months passed, it became harder and harder to conceal. She did her best to hide it, to keep running with the band of huntresses as though nothing had changed, terrified of what would happen if Artemis discovered her condition, because the goddess's vow of chastity was absolute, and Artemis was not known for her mercy toward those who broke it, even unwillingly. The discovery came, in the cruelest way, on an ordinary day. The band of huntresses, hot and tired from the chase, stopped at a clear pool to rest, and Artemis bade them all join her in the cool water. Callisto hung back, desperate, making excuses, and her hesitation gave her away. The truth was revealed before the whole company. Artemis was enraged. She did not stop to ask how it had happened, did not pause to consider that Callisto had been deceived and wronged. She saw only that one of her sworn followers had broken the vow, and she cast Callisto out of the band in fury, banishing her from the company of the huntresses forever. Alone now, disgraced, expelled from the only life she had known, Callisto wandered off into the wilderness to bear her child by herself. She gave birth to a son, whom she named Arcas. But her suffering was only beginning. For another, far more dangerous, enemy had taken notice. That enemy was Hera, the queen of the gods, and Hera's anger, as always, fell not on her unfaithful husband, but on the mortal woman he had wronged. It was monstrously unjust. Callisto had not chosen any of this. She had been deceived and used by Zeus against her will and had already lost her place among the huntresses because of it. But Hera did not care for any of that. She saw only another of her husband's conquests, another mortal woman to be punished, and she resolved to take a terrible revenge. Hera came upon Callisto and laid a cruel transformation upon her. Before the young mother's eyes, her own body began to change, her arms thickening and sprouting coarse brown fur, her hands curling into great clawed paws, her body swelling and bending, her face stretching into the snout of a beast. Callisto was being turned into a bear. The Greeks linger on the horror of it, that her mind remained her own, human and aware, trapped now inside the body of a wild animal. She could no longer speak, only growl. She who had been a huntress was now one of the very beasts that hunters pursued. And so Callisto was forced to live as a bear, wandering the forests in fear, hiding from the hunters she had once run with, her human heart locked inside an animal she could not escape, and somewhere out there, growing up without her, was her son. For years, Callisto lived this way, a barren body, a frightened human soul within. She haunted the wild forests of Arcadia, the very lands she had once roamed freely as a huntress. But now, everything was inverted. She, who had hunted, was now hunted. She had to flee from packs of hounds and from men with spears, hide in caves and thickets, scavenge for food, always afraid. And the cruelest part was that her human awareness never left her. She remembered who she had been. She remembered her vow, her goddess, her lost life. And above all, the old stories say, she remembered her son, the boy Arcas, whom she had been forced to abandon, who was growing up somewhere in the world of men without a mother, never knowing that the bear in the forest had once been the woman who bore him. Callisto could only wonder about him from a distance, longing for a child she could never approach, for if she came near the world of humans, she would be killed as the beast she now appeared to be. Year after year she endured it, this strange and lonely punishment for a crime that had been done to her. And then, one day, the worst possible thing happened, the very thing every part of her must have dreaded. She came face to face with her own son, and he was carrying a spear. Arcas had grown into a young man, and like his mother before him, he had become a hunter, roaming the same forest of Arcadia where Callisto, as a bear, still wandered. And on that fateful day, their paths finally crossed. Callisto, catching sight of the young hunter, knew him at once, knew with her trapped human heart that this was Arcas, her own son, grown up at last. Overwhelmed with love and longing, forgetting for a moment what she now was, she moved toward him, a great bear, lumbering toward a young man out of the trees. But Arcas saw only a wild bear advancing on him, and he did what any hunter would do. He raised his spear to defend himself, to kill the beast before it could reach him. He had no way of knowing that the bear was his mother. To him, she was simply a dangerous animal, and he braced himself to strike her down. It is one of the most agonizing moments in all of Greek myth. A mother and her son reunited at last, and the reunion about to end, with the son killing the mother. Neither of them able to stop it, she unable to speak, he unable to understand. The spear was raised. The bear stood helpless before her own child. And in that instant, someone was watching from above. It was Zeus. The king of the gods, looking down, saw the catastrophe about to unfold, saw Callisto, whom he had wronged so long ago, about to be killed by the very son their union had produced. And whatever guilt or pity finally moved him, Zeus acted at last to prevent it. In the instant before the spear could fall, he swept both of them up into the sky, the mother and the son, the bear and the hunter, and set them among the stars as constellations where they would be safe forever. Callisto became the Great Bear, the constellation we still call Ursa Major to this day, and Arcus was placed beside her as a smaller nearby constellation, the two of them turning together through the northern sky, mother and son reunited at last in the heavens, beyond the reach of any spear. It was, after everything, a kind of mercy, the closest thing to a happy ending that Callisto's story could ever have. But even here, the bitterness was not quite over. For Hera, when she saw that the woman she hated had been honored with a place among the stars, was furious all over again. And she went to the ancient gods of the sea with one last spiteful request. Hera asked the sea gods never to allow Callisto and her son to descend below the horizon, never to let them sink into the sea to rest as the other stars do. And that request, the Greeks said, is the reason that the Great Bear, alone among the constellations, never sets, why it wheels endlessly around the pole star, always above the horizon, never sinking down to bathe in the ocean and rest like the others. Even raised to the heavens, even honored among the stars, Callisto was denied her rest, forever circling, forever wronged by a jealousy that would not let her go. It is a hard, sad story, and the Greeks knew it. Callisto is one of the clearest examples in all of their myths of an innocent destroyed by the gods, a young woman who kept her vow in her heart and was deceived out of it by a god she could not refuse, who was punished for a crime committed against her, who was turned into a beast for someone else's wrongdoing and nearly killed by her own child, and even in the mercy of the stars was denied her peace. We remember her now without knowing it every time we look up and find the Great Bear turning in the northern sky. There she is, the huntress who became a bear, the bear who became a constellation, still circling overhead, still never setting after all this time. If this is the kind of story you want more of, take a moment to subscribe and tell me in the comments which myth I should tell next. Sleep well.